The rupee touched its lowest against the US dollar. The rupee has dropped nearly 7% against the US dollar in the year to date.
Rupee has actually crossed 80 for the first time ever. I mean, it was practically already there, but 80 has happened.
Nomura expects rupee to fall to rupees 82 in the third quarter of this calendar year. So how does the fall in the rupee impact various sectors? Which sectors are the winners and which are the laggards? In this video, we will discuss the sectors feeling the worst from the rupee's fall and those winning big. Since the foreign trade is made mostly in dollars, the fall of rupee benefits net exporters, who will receive more rupees for their dollars, while net importers will have to pay more for dollars. So here are the sectors that might see a profit due to the fall in rupee. First, the information technology sector. IT companies are the biggest gainers as they bill most clients in US dollars, and the major chunk of revenue comes from exports. A 1% fall in rupee against the dollar translates into 0.3% of operating margin benefit. What is operating margin benefit? The operating margin measures how much profit a company makes on a dollar of sales after paying for the variable production costs such as wages and raw material, but before paying the interest or tax. The second sector is pharma. Pharma is another gainer as it's a big exporter, though raw materials are substantially imported. In FY22, India exported 24.62 billion worth of products, of which 30% was to the US. Exporters to the US stand to gain the most. Now let's talk about garment industry. The garment industry exports significantly and sources most of its input cost locally. Hence, for every 1% fall in rupee, profit increases for them by 0.25 to 5%. The rupee fall may also make exports more competitive. Now let's talk about the favorite beverage, tea. India exports nearly 230 million kg of teas, or around 16% of what it produces, to countries like Russia, Iran, the US, the UK, Germany, Japan, Poland, and the CIS country. The resulting profit is expected to rise by 5 to 10% in the current fiscal. Also, the competitiveness of Indian tea in the world will increase, allowing for more exports. Now, let's talk about steel. India exports between 10 to 15% of its steel production, making Indian steel more competitive globally. If the rupee falls to 85 versus the US dollar, it will absorb the entire 15% duty on steel export that the government imposed in May. Now let's talk about some sectors that will encounter a tough time, starting with oil and gas. The most adversely impacted sector in India imports over 85% of its oil and half of the gas it consumes, increasing purchasing costs for crude importers such as Indian Oil, BPCL, HPCL, as well as gas importers like GAIL and GSPC. The rupee revenue of local producers such as ONGC, Oil India, Vedanta, RIL, and fuel exporters such as RIL will rise. Now let's talk about renewable energy. Indian solar plants depend heavily on imported solar cells and modules. As a result, project costs would rise and even tariff would be higher in future bids. Every rupee 1 fall versus dollar leads to a 2 paisa unit increase in the tariff. Now let's talk about FMCG, or the fast-moving consumer goods industry. Key raw materials like crude and palm oil derivatives are imported and account for nearly half of the input cost in the production. Companies have increased price hikes to offset higher input costs, contributing to further inflation. Companies will need an additional 15% price revision to maintain their gross margin, which is revenue subtracted by the cost of the goods sold. Now let's talk about consumer electronics. Around 40 to 60% of the total input cost, including components, are imported in this segment. For smartphones, it's around 70 to 80% of the components are imported. The recent drop in component cost has largely offset the decline in rupee, but companies are not likely to drop prices since they want to improve their margins after 2 years of COVID-induced slowdown. Also, the demand decreased from 30 to 35% in the last quarter. Now let's talk about the aviation industry. About 60% of the costs are in dollar terms, including spares, maintenance, aircraft delivery, and payments. The fall of rupee will raise the cost burden when fuel prices are at record highs. This will impact profitability of airlines. Also, overseas tickets might become more expensive. Now let's talk about the telecom industry. Telcos spend around $6 billion annually importing network equipment. A falling rupee makes gear imports more costly. A weaker rupee could push up the capital expenditure bill by 5% in FY23. Profits will be impacted unless telcos increase tariff. Now let's talk about the cement industry, another laggard here. Energy and logistic account for around 50 to 60% of the total cost. As the rupee weakens, both these bills will go up, impacting the margins of cement companies. During lean seasons, they may also be unable to pass on higher costs to the consumers. Some industry are unsure how the change will affect them. One of them is the auto sector. So what will be the impact? It makes the cars in general more expensive. The exact impact will depend on input purchased and the level of exports. If the exports are high, then it's a good thing. There is some silver lining to rupee as well. Bloomberg data compiled by the ET Intelligence Group shows that while rupee has depreciated in terms of dollar, on average the rupee has appreciated 2.79% against the G10 currencies. So what are these G10 currencies? The G10 currencies include the Swiss franc, Swedish krona, Danish krone, Norwegian krone, and the dollar of Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, besides the yen, pound sterling, and euro. As currency value continues to fluctuate, we will see various trends changing in different sectors. If you like this video, share your views in the comment section. Thanks for watching.